Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome everyone. This is Yong-Wook Lee, task manager of this webinar. I would like to open the webinar on the sustainable and resilient agriculture in Asia and the Pacific. Today we'll discuss recovery of global value chain in agriculture and food, and the transformation to sustainable and resilient agriculture amid the new challenges, including climate change and digitalization. Before we begin, please allow me to explain the house rules briefly. All the presenters keep your video on and unmute your mic when presenting, and keep your video on and mute your mic when not presenting. All attendees keep no video and no audio. When you ask questions, please type your questions in Q&A box. The moderators and speakers will respond to you in Q&A time. Now, we'll have opening session. I have the honor to welcome Dean Tetsushi Sonobe to deliver his welcoming remarks. He's the Dean and CEO of the Asian Development Bank Institute, ADBI, the Tokyo-based think tank of Asian Development Bank that promotes the realization of a prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asia and the Pacific through policy research and capacity building. He holds his PhD in economics from Yale University and BA in economics from the University of Tokyo. Before joining ADBI in April 2020, Dean Sonobe served for 6 years as the Vice President of National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, GRIPS in Tokyo. He also previously served as a professor of economics at Tokyo Metropolitan University and GRIPS. Dean Sonobe, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Yong-Wook-san. Good day. Welcome to this workshop. I'm really pleased to provide some welcome remarks here on behalf of Asian Development Bank Institute. It's my pleasure to co-organize this important workshop with the Vietnam National University of Agriculture and the Sustainable Development and the Climate Change Department of Asian Development Bank. President Dr. Nguyen Thi Lan, thank you very much for joining us to provide opening remarks and also serve as a moderator. And thank you also to all participants, speakers, and moderators, including my former colleague, Professor Aya Suzuki of the University of Tokyo, and the moderators and organizing team members, Muhammad Abu Basha of SDCC ADB, Professor Chan Fu Kwon of VNUA, and Yong-Wook Lee, Dil Rahat, Lin Feng, and Hashizume-san of ADBI. The first of the operational priority of ADB is to address the remaining poverty, and another priority is rural development. So agriculture and food security are high on agenda at both ADB and ADBI. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, there was remarkable progress in reduction and eradication of acute poverty and food insecurity. Still, FAO estimated 22% of Asian population was still suffering severe or moderate food insecurity, and over 54% of the severe food insecure people lived in Asia and the Pacific just before the pandemic. As you know, the pandemic has caused a considerable setback in these efforts of international communities, developing country governments, NGOs, and others to reduce poverty and food insecurity. In ASEAN, for example, the food price rose by 15% after February 2020, leading to acute hunger and malnutrition for millions of poorest people. In future, global population is expected to increase. The increase could be 2 billion people over the next 30 years, from 7.7 to 9.7 billion in 2050. To ensure secure access to food, agriculture production, and productivity will need to increase by 70%. Rebuilding agriculture and the food system presents a big challenge to the world. Yes, because in addition to this population growth and the setback due to the COVID-19, we are facing the climate change. And agriculture will be a major sector affected severely by climate change, even though agricultural sector is said to be one of the major source of green gas emission. So rebuilding agriculture and the food system presents really a big challenge to the world. As Professor Theodor Schultz emphasized 60 years ago or even earlier, what is needed is to shed the light of science to rural development. The application of science and technology is the key. Since then, we have repeatedly confirmed that he was right. And I think the importance of application of science and technology has remained unchanged. But there are some things that we have also learned about the application of science and technology. We need infrastructure, so we have to finance infrastructure investment, and also technology is maybe developed by the researchers, but it must be used by the farmers. So we need the extension service and the training farmers, and also the agricultural produce must be sold. And then the farmers have to have a handsome income. So for that purpose, marketing is important, and the management skills are also important. So those things must be added in order to finance infrastructure investment and finance research and development, and then this move toward the higher value creation of the agricultural sector or rural sector to be sustainable. So including these new insights, so new challenges require new solutions, and our time, I think this conference, this workshop is very timely in that aspect. So I sincerely hope this workshop will help address these challenges and offer a platform for all of you to share and exchange policy recommendations. Finally, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us here today. Thank you very much again. And the best wishes for everyone successful event for the next few hours. Okay. I stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your welcoming remarks. Now, next, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Nguyen Thi Lan, President of Vietnam National University of Agriculture. She graduated the PhD program in veterinary and virology at the University of Miyazaki, Japan in 2007. She is currently working as the President of Vietnam National University of Agriculture. President Dr. Nguyen, please.
Okay, thank you. Your Excellency, Dr. Tetsuo Sonobe, Dean of Asian Development Bank Institute, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you and co-chair the opening this afternoon to the workshop on sustainable and resilient agriculture in Asia and the Pacific, jointly organized by Asian Development Bank Institute, ASEAN Development Bank, and Vietnam National University of Agriculture. The COVID-19 pandemic has strong influence on the agriculture sector, especially in production and supply chains, spanning smallholder farms to agriculture, processing to exporters. Food export restrictions have been adopted by many countries to protect domestic interests, leading to greater global food insecurity. Further, climate change is enforcing pressure on crop and livestock production, generating agri-food chain disruptions. The workshop aims to explore agriculture and food global value chain recovery challenge and the importance of enhancing international cooperation within the sector. Exchange sustainable agriculture knowledge and technological innovation, and share domestic and regional level best practice for enhancing sustainable agriculture development. Today, workshop would include 3 sessions with numbers of topics regarding recovery of global value chain in agriculture and food, climate change and agriculture, and digitalization of agriculture. The workshop is attended by around 40 participants from organizations, universities, and research institutes of Japan, the Republic of Korea, India, the Philippines, and Vietnam. Therefore, this workshop will provide us not only essential knowledge, but also great opportunity to share experiences, both technical and regulatory issues. I take this chance to express the deepest thanks to ASEAN Development Bank and ASEAN Development Bank Institute for selecting and trusting Vietnam National University of Agriculture to be the co-organizer of the workshop. This is a great honor for Vietnam National University of Agriculture and an opportunity for our university speakers to present their research results. My sincere thanks to go to the organizers for their dedication in professionally conceptualizing, preparing, and organizing this workshop. All of them have been working with us since the beginning of the planning stage. And they are still here today for all of us, even though they are both very busy with their responsibility at their agencies. I truly appreciate the attentions of all the experts and scientists joining in the workshop. I hope that everyone has many fascinating discussions to identify new approach and solutions contributing to building sustainable and resilient agriculture in Asia and the Pacific. Then would take the results of this workshop, upload on the website of ADBI to transfer experience and knowledge to audience. This is an opportune time for me to declare the official opening of the workshop on sustainable and resilient agriculture in Asia and Pacific. And I wish you all for the full time of interesting and beneficial program. Finally, I wish our workshop achieve a great success and all the participants for a good health and and safe stay from the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you for your opening remarks. Before we move to first section, I would like to take a group photo. I would like to ask all the speakers and moderators turn on your camera. Lingfang, please take a picture when ready. One, two, three. Just in case, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now we'll have the first section. In this session, we'll discuss recovery of global value chain in agriculture and food. I would like to introduce the moderator, Dr. Truong Hu Kwong. He is a professor of Vietnam National University of Agriculture. He was a former dean of Faculty of Accounting and Business Management. He holds a PhD in agricultural science from University of Hohenheim, Germany. His research activities focus on agriculture, marketing and trade, and the value chain for agricultural products and food. Dr. Kwong, the floor is yours. Unmute, please. Dr. Kwong, unmute, please. Dr. Kwong? Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, thank you very much for your introduction. So the first I talk about the our session 1. We focus in recovering global value chain in agriculture and food. So the global value chain connect with the producer and consumer across to the world, have delivery stable supply and producer and delivery choice to consumer, and at the same time contribute to reduce the poverty developed countries. However, COVID-19 pandemic hit the global value chain is both the legs in the farm, labor, processing, transport, and logistics and demand side. This session is a highlight the restriction to GVA and also discuss how to successfully recovering GVA in agriculture. And first, I would like to introduce the first I would like to introduce the Professor Song Soon Lim. He is the professor in Korea University. He have presentation, and also the first I would like to introduce the summary, the CV. So, I invite the Professor Song Suli. You have presentation, please.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kwong. Thank you for your kind introduction. Today, my topic is about what's the next for agro-food value chain after this COVID-19 pandemic. My approach would be a macro level of assessment, and my own observations for the prospects for this ABC's development in the future, especially in the Asian context. Okay, today's I will talk about those agricultural global value chain in Asia before we get into how we see the future development of those our value chains, then I would like to conclude I would like to suggest what task before us as a country or international organizations, how we can approach those value chains challenges in the future. Well, as you all understand, the value chains is interactions or linkages between people and the businesses. I like to re-emphasize this notion. It's all about human interaction, not only goods, not only services, but this should be the human interaction and activities. We need to broaden our definition of value chains in the sense. So how those individuals or people or laborers, workers, their influence on this value chain building, and how this COVID-19 would affect those individuals or laborers, that has a spillover effect all over the chain, supply chain. So we want to build this effective agricultural value chain. I followed this diagram from the Dumont and Rossard work. This is a case of Mekong Delta, Vietnam, and trace those rice value chains, starting from the seed supply to all the way through the consumption. My research in the previous, I had the opportunity to analyze those value chain and network in rice sectors. Starting from this maybe paddy rice, you can start from the paddy rice production in the farm level. Then eventually this will go pass through this the production and processing channels. Then they will lead into the hands of consumers at the market. Well, I use this data to analyze what is the proportion of this traded goods in rice, paddy, and the milled rice. Then we have here is what the brown rice. So in the theory, we said that the rice changed from paddy toward the milled form. It increased the value, and this added value will create the win-win outcome, especially for major exporters of rice in Asian countries. My data and analysis find that, in Asia, over 10 years period, the milled rice trade gains growth compared to the 10 years ago. That means what? In Asian rice exporters, now they are increasingly involved in the milled rice trade. So that will create some additional opportunities. And based upon that, my previous research, I decide this time using this ADB's multi-regional input-output table 2019. Unfortunately, this database is before the pandemic, but this is the most recent database I can obtain now. And there is 62 countries in the database. Out of that, 26 are Asian economies. And sector is a total of 35 sectors. Agriculture and food is one of two sectors in this out of 35. So I pick 8 countries in Asia. That means China, Indonesia, India, Japan, Korea, Thailand, Vietnam, and Kazakhstan. And agriculture, the aggregate sector of agriculture, including forestry and fishing, and the food sector and beverage and tobacco. I wanted to compare their development of value chain with the other sectors for this presentation material. Now I compare them to manufacturing sectors, how agricultural primary sectors could develop those value chain in 2019 in comparison with the other sectors, especially second industry here in the manufacturing sectors. For agricultural sectors, this computation indicate that China, for instance, they have a relatively large export of DVX. That means what? Chinese produce the agricultural products, and these products become major ingredients of other exporters, the exportable goods production. So China provide raw or intermediate the agricultural products to other countries, other exporters. Then other exporters use these Chinese ingredients to produce their output, exportable good. So China has shown very large share in this intermediate goods export activities in the world. Also, I find that Thailand is another Asian countries who contribute in that aspect. But unfortunately, all these 8 countries have shown that their domestic value addition still account for most of their export of agricultural goods. In other words, most countries use domestically produced goods to make their the agricultural export goods. So the VAX ratio turned out to be over 96% for China, 97% for Indonesia, India even marked 97%. That means what? Still, these countries' global value chain in agriculture sector is rather limited. But we see the Vietnamese cases, Vietnam marked 6-7% in the VAX ratio. Relatively speaking, Vietnam increased their global value chain participation in 2019 compared to other competing countries in Asia. Food sectors show the similar landscape here. We find that this time, those forward linkages for all countries rather limited. In other words, the other exporting countries of food, they use limited quantity of the raw materials or ingredient from China. So probably I cannot tell for sure for this pattern, but my own observation is probably food sectors, maybe this global value chains would be rather limited due to some regulatory restrictions or food safety concerns, or some other the institutional or governmental arrangement in this aspect. Like agriculture sectors, Vietnam show very robust performance in global value chain. Here is the manufacturing sectors as a reference. Their participation here in the global value chain is rather stronger than agriculture or the food sectors. So from this observation, I ask this question to our audience today. Given this analysis, can we say that there is a room for the greater level of global participation in food sectors or agriculture sectors? Because we are lagging behind other like manufacturing sectors in this analysis. Well, I would like to give my initial response to this question is yes. We have opportunities and room before us. We can increase this the GVC challenge opportunities in Asia. We can make it through like other sectors in the industry. This is something. Next topic is about COVID-19 effect. I believe other presentators will address this issue more micro level. So let me go over very roughly how the impact of pandemic has made in the value chains in this region. Well, this previous study approached this value chain effect from system components like a farming, production, or the governing institution, like a coordination activities between this mode or stage of value chain. So these are very relevant against these disturbances caused by COVID-19, probably this system as well as governing institutions have something to do with on the value chain impact. And this research done by Dixon and others, they tried to summarize this COVID-19 effect by direct versus indirect impact. The solid line indicated direct impact, including the movement restriction due to lockdowns or governmental policy to relieve those disturbance by providing food, cash, or employment opportunities, or obviously we have a rural labor problems due to this one. But in direct way, this has a some spillover effect. What government has agri-food support policies to mitigate those adverse effects caused by the COVID-19, or that has how this will affect the food security, rural security, nutrition security, things like that. This topic will be covered by next speaker, I believe. And one of these studies highlight my own feeling is a gender dynamics effect. Especially the female in farm sectors, their role has changed or disproportionately affected by this disease. Well, this is a selective the point I collect from the previous studies. What is the impact? Obviously, you can find the labor shortage, migratory labor restriction, things like that. One thing I want to highlight this point. This negative impact on the exporters, especially who are also seeing their ingredients from the world market. Okay, their impact, we said supply chain effect. Compared to those output production effect, well, this supply chain effect was larger in general. So that's why we are talking about how we can rebuild this value chain after COVID-19 under the new situations, surroundings, how we can minimize the supply chain effect while we can guarantee the quality and safe food in the future. That is a very important task before us. Resilience, we see that the farm sectors are more resilient than other sectors through this pandemic experience. For instance, if you look at this data, the agriculture sector is the only one compared to electronics and or vehicle or parts and other sectors, all other sectors. The global trade shrink by 8% in 2020. But if you look at the agriculture sectors, the trade actually has shown a positive growth. That is one indicator we can say that resilience of farm sectors is approved through this pandemic experience. What would be the future of this value chain development? Well, in a word, I can express this way. The world may not return to the status quo. We will have a new world. We will have a new normal. So this is only 4 new normals I summarize today's presentation, but you can imagine there are tons of different new normals or new dynamics you can find. Number 1, we will ensure those safety and quality issues through this pandemic. People focus on the quality and work safety under the new normal environment. So planning and preparation need more cost. So we need to prepare to higher expenses in this management and operation. And limitation of workforces call for robotics and automations or some innovation in logistics. And traceability would be the essential part of global value chain. We are talking about blockchain development and other way to ensure those traceability. That is the one we foresee now. And digitalization. Okay, this is another major topic what we talk about. It's Industry 4.0, artificial intelligence. They will tell us how to produce from where and targeting which consumers in the chain. It will identify the connections and patterns across real-time situations and the demand for products. And also it will predict consumptions given virus spread and lockdown policies. In the supply side or producer's point of view, it will connect the demand and it will match with the prediction and the upstream value chains. So it will have a more closer match between those suppliers, and automatic purchase orders and production can be executed under this supply side artificial intelligence. But the challenge is to increase the capability of smallholders, especially in Asian context, how we can encourage these small farmers or disadvantaged farmers to be part of this new development of agricultural value chain. That is a huge task, huge challenge before us and the international organizations. Localization is another drivers of in the future in the value chain. Supply management should shift more toward the local basis. They will look for from the alternative suppliers, the flexible outsourcing structure. They will find the local substitutes instead of just risk-sharing contract. And they want to find those substitutes from near or local sources. So localization will be a process will proceed in the future. So, but obviously this shorter supply chain will reduce international trade. That means what? Economists, we say that will deter the efficient resource allocation. So higher cost arising from that. Okay. How we can, this economies of scale, how we can address this inefficiency issues due to the localization. What is a compromising point between efficiency and the safety and the local supply? Lastly, I want to point out the trade policy point of view. Okay, COVID-19 events were brought about many trade restrictions taken by individual countries. I look at the WTO website information about these measures. There are about 55 measures on the agricultural trade or agricultural products, and 59% were trade facilitation. They reduced the import tariff, things like that. Okay, so this is a trade facilitation. About 41% of total measures was trade restriction, like a trade quota, export ban, or things like that. So luckily, we can say that according to WTO notification, countries, in responding to this pandemic, they has a more trade measures to embed, facilitation measures. Another database, GTA, said that, it also similar to the result. Trade facilitation was larger than trade restriction. So, given this numbers of measures and amount of tradable goods, roughly speaking, maybe pandemic has less than what we worried about effect on international trade. But if you look at the individual countries like Korea, for who many population here, people concerned about food security, this is the very challenging issues. Okay. Major exporters close their territory, their market, okay, for the export. That is a great challenge for many net food importing countries, including many least developed countries. And this is the graphical presentation. As you see for food products, agricultural products, the first facilitation measure was larger than the restriction measures between 2020 March to September. Only period, the restriction measures was larger than the facilitation one. This is the food security concern. If this is last over a certain period of time, probably that will threaten many countries' food supply. This is one thing. We can compare this one with the medical products, including personal protective equipment or mask or some other things. So I would like to summarize what policy should be given this pandemic experience. We need stability in trade. We need transparency, and we need cooperation and monitoring and control of export restriction. And digital trade is not avoidable. So WTO rules must consider this, how to ensure fair and the competitive digital trade in the future. Capacity building is, yes, that is a definite the answer to the new challenge. Conclusions. Organization of agricultural value chain under COVID-19 is subject to reassessment between how to secure efficiency and how to control those risks associated with the change. Diversification is one direction, but at the same time, how to deal with those increasing costs of this diversification, how to protect intellectual property rights, how to trade off those efficiency loss. That is our task to handle with. And digital transformation, we need to ready for this digital transformation in value chain. And again, this cost would be unequally burdens on the countries who are participant, especially small holders in the farm sectors. Digital economy now reshaping this the agricultural value chain. Now they are talking about omni-dimensional management, not by linear sequence of this supply chain, but they want to see this one as a package. So the importing countries, importing companies can control those flows of goods between these nodes. And lastly, I call for international corporations and institutional reform under a rule basis and open trading system. This would be the vital in sustainable agricultural value chain development in Asia. Thank you for your listening.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Professor Lim Song-Ju. So before the next presentation, I want to introduce briefly the Professor Lim Song-Ju. The Professor Song-Ju Lim, he teaches international economics, and also he carry out research on international food and trade and trade negotiation, international institution and food policy at the Korea University. He received PhD degree from Texas A&M University in 1995, majoring in agricultural finance and policy. Lim research on international trade and development policy have led to many publications, including academic journals.
Excuse me, Dr. Kwong.
Yeah.
We are in tight schedule, so please
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So thank you very much. Maybe I have left the presenter, and also I spend time for discussion. So please, next, I introduce the Dr. Nguyễn Anh Đức. He in the Department of Quantitative Analysis Faculty Economic and Rural Development and VNUA. And he also got PhD in the University of Adelaide 2017. And also he focused research on consumer behavior related to food and purchasing, nutrition and health and food security. And also he focused in agriculture policy and value chain and food system. And today he have presentation focused in the title of impact of COVID-19 on food security and nutrition, the case study in Vietnam. So I would like to introduce Dr. Đức, please.
Okay, thank you, Professor Trần Hữu Cường. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nguyễn Anh Đức, a lecturer at Faculty of Economics and Rural Development, Vietnam National University of Agriculture. My honor to be a presenter in the Sustainable and Resilient Agriculture in Asia and the Pacific workshop, jointly organized by ADB, ADBI, and VNUA. My presentation is entitled Impacts of COVID-19 on Food Security and Nutrition, the case study of Vietnam. The COVID-19 pandemic is a health and human crisis, threatening the food security and nutrition of millions of people around the world. The unfolding crisis has affected food system and threatened people's access to food via multiple aspects. We have witnessed not only a major disruption to food supply chains, but also a major global economic slowdown. These crises have resulted in lower income and higher price of some foods, putting food out of reach for many and undermining the right to food. According to the State of Food Security and Nutrition 2020 report, 2 billion people face food insecurity at the moderate or severe level before the outbreak of the pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic is undermining efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal 2, Zero Hunger. The most recent estimate indicate that between 83 to 132 million additional people, including 38 to 80 million people in developing countries, will experience food insecurity as a direct result of the pandemic. Many least developing countries are at risk of significant food insecurity because of the secondary socio-economic impacts of the pandemic. A number of overlapping and reinforcing dynamics are affecting food system and food security and nutrition, including disruption to food supply chains, loss of income and livelihood, a widening of inequality, disruption to social protection programs, other food environments, and uneven food price in localized contexts. I will just quickly review two of them. As the pandemic-related lockdowns took hold in many countries, there were widespread media reports of food items being dumped or plunged back into the fields because of either collapsed demand or difficulties in getting this food to the markets. The movement of food through international trade were affected by lockdown measures. As borders closed and demand for imported food dropped, food producers reliant on export markets were highly vulnerable. In the beginning of the outbreak, some food exporting countries imposed restrictions on key staple food like rice and wheat, which led to some disruption in the global food value chains and higher price of this crop. Also, when the pandemic unfolded, many countries moved to shut down informal food markets, which governments saw as a space for potential disease transmission, reflecting a bias in public health and food policy. Informal food markets are extremely important as source of food and livelihood for many families in developing countries. The dynamics outlined above affect food security and nutrition in complex way. For example, the global economic recession triggered by lockdowns had a negative impact on food accessibility. As the crisis continues, short-term coping strategies like saving or selling of assets are reaching their limits or have been exhausted. Increase in food price has directly affected household ability to purchase enough food. As people access to food diminished in the crisis, this also have an impact on ability to afford a healthy diet. The impact is more severe for poorer households who spend a higher proportion of income on food. The shift of consumption towards more processed foods and fewer fruits and vegetables during the crisis also contributed to the poor nutrition. Now let's talk about the food availability for Vietnamese people before the outbreak of the pandemic. As you can see, food availability per person increased for most food groups except rice between 2014 and 2018. This also means that the share of daily calorie intake from rice decreased, but remained the most important source for nutrition in Vietnam. Share of daily calorie intake from other grains increased to compensate for the decrease in the calorie intake from rice, while the share of daily calorie intake from animal source foods, vegetables, and fruits were unchanged during this period. Now let's take a look at the average dietary energy supply adequacy. This indicator expresses the dietary energy supply as a percentage of the average dietary energy requirement, analyzed together with the prevalence of undernourishment. It allows discerning whether undernourishment is mainly due to insufficient food supply or particularly to a bad distribution. Prevalence of undernourishment in Vietnam has continuously decreased over the last 2 decades. Thanks to the great effort of the government and international support, by the end of 2020, only 6.7% of the population in Vietnam were undernourished compared to 21% of the population in 2002. Prevalence of moderate and severe food insecurity remained around 6.7% between 2016 and 2020, while during the same period, this figure at the global level increased from 22.6 to 26.6%. Children stunting and wasting decreased, but overweight and obesity increased significantly over the 20 years period. According to the UNICEF State of the World Children 2019 report, 1 in every 3 Vietnamese children under the age of 5 is either malnourished or overweight. This means that we should pay more attention to the existence of the triple burden of malnutrition, including undernutrition, overnutrition, and micronutrient deficiency. Now let me talk about the impact of the fourth COVID-19 wave on the food supply and demand in Vietnam in the recent months. Health Minister Nguyễn Thanh Long has said the ongoing fourth wave of COVID-19 infection is much more serious than any before. Speaking at the national online meeting about COVID-19, he said, despite drastic actions, many localities, especially Ho Chi Minh City and the southern Vietnam, were facing very complex COVID-19 outbreaks, which much more negative impacts on daily life as well as socio-economic development than the previous waves. 19 southern localities are reporting major challenges in agriculture and husbandry production due to the fourth wave of COVID-19 outbreaks, which could lead to a food shortage. Farmers are reluctant to continue their production due to plunging sales caused by mobility restriction. Vegetable and fruit exports fell 30%. Many meat processing plants have been forced to shut down as most workers are unvaccinated. Other food processing factories also face many challenges, with the food supply chains possibly broken. In the next slide, I would like to talk about the food security in Vietnam as provided by the Hunger Med, produced by the World Food Program. The prevalence of people with insufficient food production consumption in Vietnam is predicted about 20% of the population as of September 9, according to the World Food Programme. Although this figure in Vietnam is a bit higher than in some other Asian developing countries. For example, Laos and India is 18% and Philippines is 15% of the population. The number with insufficient food consumption has decreased significantly in Vietnam during the last 3 months. This is because Vietnamese government provide financial support and the practical relief activities come from both government and the citizens. For example, like rice ATM or the free supermarket, and the support from international communities have contributed to the relieve the negative impact of COVID-19 on food security in Vietnam. The Vietnamese government also implemented some policy like green light or green mobility. This means that they're granting green light codes to eligible enterprise and vehicles for goods transportation to ensure the smooth transportation and circulations of goods between the pandemic affected provincials and other regions. So in summary, first, I think that measures to control and mitigate COVID-19 outbreaks have been affecting global food supply chains and also the food supply chains in Vietnam. Border restriction and lockdowns are slowing harvest in some regions, leaving millions of agricultural workers and farmers without livelihoods. Meat processing plants and food markets are being forced to close in many locations. Farmers have been burying perishable produce or dumping milk due to the supply chain disruption and failing consumer demand. On the demand side, higher level of unemployment, loss of incomes, and rising food costs are making access to food difficult for consumers. Urban consumers, especially poor consumers, are struggling to access fresh and nutritious foods because their source of nutrition mostly come from informal markets.
Please.
Actor in all. Sorry.
Limited time, please.
Yes, okay. I'm coming to the end. Actors in all parts of the food system are impacted by the pandemic. The pandemic came at a time when food security and food system were already strained. Deep global economic shocks caused by COVID-19 will impact the cash flows and financial liquidity of producer, small, medium, agribusiness to financial institution due to inhibited production capacity, limited market access, lack of employment, and unexpected medical costs. The pandemic also raised the alarm on the urgent need to transform the food system. So some policy recommendations. First, the government should implement more robust target social protection programs to improve individual access to health and nutritious foods. While the government could face budgetary constraints, now is not the time to be cutting back on social safety net programs, especially those that improve household access to healthy and nutritious food. Income assistance, vouchers for household food purchase, and housing assistance can be effective means of support in some contexts. Vouchers for food purchase should function in both formal and informal markets and allow for adequate fruit and vegetable purchase. In other cases, public work employment programs have allowed the government to build and maintain vital infrastructure and provide employment during economic recession. The second, the government should ensure protection for vulnerable and marginalized farmers who are affected by the crisis. It is essential that farmers are granted clear and protected rights within legislation at the national level. Expanding access to social protection, including health insurance, transfer to mitigate income loss, and measures to support production to small-scale farmers is a key to reduce their vulnerability. The third one is support more diverse and resilient distribution system, including shorter supply chains and localized market. National and local governments can play a big role in strengthening infrastructure for localized markets because these markets are the dominant ties for local foods, provide outlets for food for different types of producers and consumers. They are also important in strengthening livelihood for local producers, processors, and sellers. And lastly, the last recommendation from my presentation is support more resilient food production system based on agroecology and other sustainable form of food production. So thank you for listening, and this is the reference for my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Dux. Okay, next, I invite Professor Suzuki Agai. She is the professor in University of Tokyo. Her research interest in agriculture production and marketing, globalization, and food system. And she also got PhD from Department of Agriculture Resource Economics, the University of California, Davis, and has also taught in National Graduate Institute of Policy Study in Japan. So I would like to Professor Suzuki. She has a short presentation. You look at the timing, please.
Okay, is this okay? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's okay. Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Let me, as the time is short, let me just go very quickly. So, wait, let me do this again, sorry. This is better.
Okay, it's clearly shown.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about rising importance of aquaculture and issues of sustainability. Okay. Let me start with 3 facts about aquaculture. Aquaculture provides half of the world's fishery products. So more than half of fish we eat is actually from aquaculture, not the, yeah. And then the second fact, aquaculture contributes to a greater share of animal proteins consumed by humans than that of beef. So actually the share of animal protein from fish is bigger than that of beef in the world. And third, majority of aquaculture production takes place in developing countries in Asia and carried out by small-scale farmers. So these facts really tell you the importance of aquaculture sector. This shows the volume of fish over time, but the orange and red is from capture fisheries, and this blue areas are by the aquaculture. So it's increasing within this 30 years or so. And this is predominantly Asian phenomenon. You can see China, large portion of aquaculture, and also in Asia. So it is very important for Asian countries. This is the breakdown for different countries. So similarly, the aquaculture is this blue. So it's increasing in many, many countries in Asia. Right. And not only as a production and income increase, aquaculture is important for the nutrition of people. So this figure is plotting the relationship between the animal protein intake and the fish share within the animal protein. So Asia is here. So although animal protein intake is less than others say this is European countries, our consumption in the fish share is large in Asian countries. And it's also interesting that it's also true for the African countries. So fish is very important source of animal protein for people in Asia and Pacific, and basically for the developing countries. Right, so I talked about the importance of aquaculture. And this is typical value chain of aquaculture. So you have fish farmer here, and then they buy input from a feed dealer, and then they buy baby shrimp or baby fish from hatcheries, and feed input is connected to the feed manufacturer, and they affect the natural environment, and they sell fish or shrimp to the collector, go to processor, export, and domestic market. So yeah, I want to talk about the issues along the supply chain. So here it's more on the natural environment. So coastal land and marine resources. I think you've probably read something about the destruction of mangroves and coastal habitat and ecosystems because of aquaculture, or depletion of wild fish for feed, because feed basically rely on the wild fish, although there are also new technologies that don't rely on these. Surrounding environment, saltwater intrusion for farms or pond effluents, if farmers discharge without treating these water, that would affect other farmers. Overuse of groundwater. So these are the issues in the natural environment. And for the farmers level, so to meet the demand, to meet the global demand, so intensive farming of aquaculture has been increasing, and for that, if you don't use appropriate methods, there's high risk of disease. And for this, farmers use prohibited antibiotics to prevent or treat diseases. So that's a problem itself. And high risk of crop failure and debt. And also, they tend to purchase these feed on credit from these traders. So that would limit farmers' choices in what to buy. Potential negative spillover among farmers, because they are all connected by the water canal. So if one farmer does something bad, that would affect other farmers. And traceability along the chain is also difficult because these are small farmers, and collectors tend to mix fish from different farmers. So even if a problem happens, it's difficult to know where this came from. For the processors, a lot of times workers' health or ethics of working environment has been talked about. And at the consumer health level, as I said, use of antibiotics could be a problem. So my research has focused on this use of antibiotics, and so fish and fishery products is actually the rejection rate at the importing countries is very large in this sector relative to other sectors. So this is Australia, EU, US, and Japan. This is using the data of import quarantine, and actually a large part of the rejection is due to this sector. So in our project, this is research also jointly done with Professor Woo Hon Nam of the Foreign Trade University and Gwen Wu Lee from Hitotsubashi University. So we looked at use of antibiotics and how can we change their behavior. And then we implemented the 3 different experiments. So maybe they don't know the technical know-how. Maybe they don't know the real residue level of their shrimp. And maybe even if they know all this, maybe the price doesn't meet their practice. So these are the experiments we have done, and we also collected data. And just quickly, so 3 interventions. We looked at the impacts on knowledge, practice, chemical detection. Interestingly, our quality information intervention, which is informing farmers how much residue there is in their own shrimp, it improved the knowledge of farmers. Also, they improved the practice, and also reduced the probability of detecting the chemical afterwards. So among our interventions, quality information was most effective. And this is subsample analysis. So we separated the sample into 2, those who detected positive in the beginning and detected negative. And then we saw that these positive effects are found basically from these farmers who had positive detection at the baseline. So yeah, this intervention worked quite well. So quality information, so quantifying residues for farmers, so visualize what's inside is important for the farmers. Right, so lastly, I wanted to talk about the COVID impacts. We are also doing the survey, but because of COVID, actually our survey is still on the way. So here I'm just going to talk about, what I summarized from the literature. So for this sector, it's been growing, but 2020 was the first year in the past 60 years with a reduction in aquaculture production. So the volume decreased. But among the countries, some countries increased production. Actually, the Ecuador, they increased production, and this became the top exporter in this year. Some other countries decreased the production. Market, US and China are two big importers. And although there was a restriction, their markets, rebounded several months after. All right, so this is the volume, world shrimp exports volume. And this dark green one is the 2020 data. So you can see that in 2020, the production decreased, and then the unit value, so the price also declined. And this is for each country. So like Ecuador, it's increased despite the pandemic. And while other countries mostly decreased. So there were several, recent studies which is using primary collected data. So I read these 4 papers, using the primary data on these stakeholders along the supply chain, and summarize what they're finding. So COVID-related policies like movement restriction, border closure, extra hygiene practices, and closure of hospitality sector like restaurants and hotels, these affected the sector. And how did it affect this value chain? So input and output logistics were disrupted, labor shortage, and lower demand and lower prices, but higher production costs because of high transportation cost, feed costs, etc. And these led to the consequence of lower income for the farmers. Some even exited, unemployment of hired workers, less nutrition, loss for, basically it's a loss for the sector as in other sector as well, I guess. So what did farmers do? Right. Some farmers adapted reactive adaptations, like temporarily stopping operations, minimizing operation costs, or bulk buying the inputs. Some of them did even further, did proactive adaptations, like introducing digital platforms, marketing diversification, like direct sales, coordination among stakeholders, seek new markets, diversify products. And assistance given by the government, typically cash transfers, better loan conditions, direct financial assistance in the sector in some countries too. Right. And this is from Belton et al. It was interesting to see, these 3 figures shows over the, this month in 2020, what happened to their buying and selling activity in different countries. So it declined sharply in the beginning, but you can also see that it's actually recovering. So in the beginning of the pandemic, the production itself went down, but you also see V-shaped recoveries. But if you look at the prices, farm gate price, traders price, retail price, all are down relative to February price. So you can see that persistence of low demand for fish, although the production recovered, that market is low. That's what we are finding. So lastly, some policy recommendations. So these 2 are for the natural environment. limitation of land use along coasts, promote feed that rely less on wild fish. And these are basically for production and market. Ease credit constraints for farmers by providing financial support, strengthen domestic markets and promote product diversification. So a lot of, like Vietnam, they had a lot of markets. So I think it was less affected, this sector was less affected in Vietnam. Monitor and regulate input markets, support R&D for alternative water treatment systems. And last 4 is on the digital aquaculture. So promote use of digital apps for market transaction, develop capacity for farmers on digital literacy, provide access to public labs to test quality. This is based on our own finding, assure traceability along the value chain. And lastly, I just wanted to show you some of the real examples which is happening in the sector. So like there are apps which you can, diagnose the health of shrimp, or you can count the number of shrimp, the fish. There's an app to connect the market. And there are lots of Facebook group, line group among farmers. They're teaching each other what to do. So this is really developing the sector because a lot of factors are not observed. So they use a lot of digital apps in this sector. And this is a traceability movement document from Thailand. So in Thailand, to assure traceability, they were requiring farmers to, so these documents move along the supply chain with the shrimp from the hatchery to the export to assure traceability. Yeah, so this kind of system could be digitalized, of course, in this age. So this will be very helpful, I think. Okay, thank you very much for your listening.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Suzuki. So right now we have some minutes for the discussion. So I just look at only one question for Professor Suzuki. They have come from the question, talk about what are the major enterprises in the aquaculture industries, shrimp or crab or carp. So I find out only one question for the Professor Suzuki.
Okay, is that which type of fish we are looking at? Okay, okay. Yeah. In our case, we are looking at shrimp, export shrimp sector.
Yeah.
The question is, what is the major product in fishing?
Yeah.
Aquaculture?
Okay. So I think, looking at the whole Asia, I think you can separate it into finfish for domestic market and shrimp for export. Of course, there are other things too, but those are the main things: finfish for domestic market and shrimp for export market.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Kwong.
Yeah.
We are behind the schedule, so I would like to move to the second section.
Okay, so thank you very much for presentators. Very interesting and also the interactive presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. In the second section, we'll discuss climate change and agriculture. I would like to introduce the moderator, Dr. Mohamed Abul Bashir of ADB. He's currently agriculture and natural resources specialist in the Asian Development Bank and works in food security and rural development thematic areas. His works focus on promotion of a reliable supply of food, knowledge-intensive agriculture, agricultural value chain development, innovations, and climate resilient farming. Prior to joining ADB, he was an economist of the World Bank and faculty of Willamette University, USA. Thus, Dr. Bashir, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction. We are already running late. So let's get into the business without further ado. So I'm looking forward to a very exciting session. on climate change and agriculture. As you know, the interlinkage between climate change and agriculture is a spiral relationship. Agriculture affects climate change and so many different ways, like emitting greenhouse gases, reducing non-agricultural resources like forest, affecting biodiversity, and so on. And these effects in turn affects the agricultural productivity, nutritional quality of food, and forcing us to intensify agricultural activities. So this spiral relationship, this two-way traffic detrimental relationship continues. But we have to put a break on this. As Dean Sonobe mentioned in his opening remarks, the COVID-19 pandemic has actually intensified the old problems that we are facing with new faces. So from that perspective, today's session is very important, and we are looking forward to hear from our experts. And at the same time, I must say that looking at the list of participants, I saw many people, many experts working in the real field from different countries, from Pakistan to Timor-Leste, are with us, and we would like to also benefit us from their perspective. So time management is a very important thing. We would like to save some time from here to hear from our learned participants as well. So my humble request to our panelists to limit their presentation from 12 to 13 minutes, 13, not 30, so that we will have some time for question and answer. And my request to our participants is to put your questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat box, so that it will get immediate attention, and we'll ask our panelists to answer your questions. Just very briefly, as I said, we have a very accomplished panelist panel here. Very briefly, to give an introduction, who are the people you are going to hear? We have Dr. Srinivasan Ancha, a PhD from Cambridge University with 25 years of experiences on interdisciplinary research and management. He is the chair of ADB's Climate Smart Agricultural Working Group, which oversees the climate smart projects and the TAs in ADB, and also he is the focal for climate change for Southeast Asia in Asian Development Bank. And Dr. Ancha received a number of accolades for his professional excellence, including the recognition from the Prime Minister of India, and he edited 8 books and also contributed more than 90 peer-reviewed academic articles. We are very lucky to have you, Dr. Ancha. Then we have Professor Seng-Hoon Lee, and he is currently teaching at Changbuk National University, who is an expert on agriculture and life sciences. Particularly, his expertise and research interest cover water, energy, food nexus, and issues so important for us from the perspective of the climate change. And he will deliver today on this issue in a bit. And then we have Ms. Bul Thi Hai, who is currently teaching at Vietnam National University of Agriculture. And Ms. Hai's current work include Farmers Cooperative, which is so important from a climate change perspective, because we know climate change is a collective problem and a failure, and has a social dimension as well. It needs not only the physical science, but also some level of social engineering as well to prevent the tragedy of commons in the end of the day. Ms. Hai's expertise and presentation will nicely complement the presentation of our 2 other experts. So without further ado, let me now invite Dr. Srinivasan Ancha for his presentation on climate smart agriculture in Southeast Asia. Dr. Ancha, floor is yours for next 12 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Bashir. I mean, you can see my presentation, I think, and also you can hear me well.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you also for the ADBI for inviting me for this session. There is a lot to share. I just wanted to mention that although the topic is on climate smart agriculture in Southeast Asia, I understand that more than half of the participants are from the rest of the regions, and these findings will be relevant to them as well. I also see that the session is organized just after COVID-19, and we have been in this effort. Actually, how do we get this climate smart agriculture implemented in the context of COVID-19 recovery? This is one challenge that we are addressing now, I mean, in many countries. So our investments and technical assistance projects are looking at both issues of COVID-19 and climate change as much as possible in all the agricultural investments that we do. So we should also remember, I mean, as Dr. Bashir mentioned, climate change probably may be a bigger problem than COVID-19 because this is going to be for a long time. And but unfortunately, both are like both COVID-19 and climate change are invisible enemies affecting the most vulnerable, and the impacts are very far reaching. That is why we should be concerned about these both challenges. And how do we integrate these challenges in terms of our recovery efforts? So I have a lot of slides, but I want you to just pay attention to this one key slide. These are the key takeaways. Some of the information has already been known to us for a long time, but it's good to recollect. First of all, agricultural productivity and natural resource management efficiency need to increase by 50 to 70% by 2050 in about 40 years to meet growing food demands and ensure food security for all. This was already pointed out by Dr. Sonobe, I mean, ADBI Dean, that there is a challenge of raising productivity. But at the same time, we have a bigger challenge. Climate change is expected to reduce the agricultural productivity by 15 to 20%, or even by 50% in some crops by 2050. So one side, we need increasing food demand because of increasing population from 7.7 to 9.8 billion. But at the same time, climate change is going to reduce the production. So how do we reconcile this? And agriculture remains a major contributor of greenhouse gas emissions. The estimates vary with each country, 18 to 29%, and more so in Southeast Asia, if we consider the entire food value chain. And to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement, which is actually aiming to reduce the temperature to 1.5 degrees or maximum of 2 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial times, the emission intensity in the agriculture sector needs to reduce by 60%. So agriculture is contributing a lot of emissions, but we need to reduce the emissions by 60% as compared with the business as usual scenario. So you can see this triple challenge. One is in terms of increasing productivity and reducing the vulnerability, and also reducing the emissions. These are all the three needs that we need to meet by 2050. And this is where climate smart agriculture is a triple win solution to achieve these objectives. So in a simple arithmetical equation, if we put basically sustainable agriculture plus resilience minus emissions is climate smart agriculture. So, but this is not easy to implement, as we all know, and addressing barriers for integrating CSA practices, climate smart agricultural practices and technologies into agricultural development plans, programs, and projects. They require a lot of efforts on the part of various governments, development partners, private sector, and farming communities. So these are my takeaways for this presentation. I will briefly show you several data supporting this logic, but this presentation will be shared, so don't need to discuss in depth on each and every presentation. I mean, each and every slide, I mean. So this shows basically Asia is the most vulnerable to climate change. If you look at the top 16 countries, 5 of them are from Southeast Asia, 5 from them are South Asia. So almost 10 or 11 out of 16 are from Asia itself. So this is really, I mean, it shows that how vulnerable this region is in terms of impacts of climate change. And in terms of even climate change and other disasters, this is a slide prepared by our climate change and disaster risk management thematic group. If you see the losses, you know, I mean, almost 5.2 billion people were affected by both climate and other natural disasters. There were 1 million disaster fatalities in Asia, and leading to almost $1.5 trillion of total direct physical loss. whether it is floods, here earthquakes are also included under the disasters, floods, droughts, cyclones, and all these things. And the IPCC special report on impacts of climate change, I just want you to focus on the ones that are, in red. If you look at this, has implications for agriculture. What is, in terms of the 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees, people may think it's all same. But in terms of impacts, they are substantial. This is what the IPCC special report on the impact of global warming of 1.5 degrees centigrade reveals. If you look at the species loss, it could be 2 times worse between 1.5 and 2 degrees centigrade. And if you look at the crop yields again almost 2.3%, 2.3 times worse, just to be if the temperature increases by 2 degrees instead of 1.5 degrees centigrade. This is in reduction of maize harvest in the tropics. Similarly, just we heard the presentation on fisheries and aquaculture. Here again, just 1.5 and 2 degrees centigrade, the impact could be 2 times worse with just 0.5 degrees rise in temperature. And again, in terms of the water scarcity, the whole our Southeast Asia is going to face a bigger challenge. The same applies to South Asia also. And here again, climate change, as was already pointed out before in my key takeaways, it is going to impact the crop yields in most countries by 2050. You can see most of the Asia is under red or light red, nothing in green except a few parts of China. So same thing with irrigated rice in Asia. This is an ADBI-Asian study done almost 10, 12 years ago. Almost 27% reduction in irrigated rice in Asia was expected because of climate change by 2050. 27% reduction, we should remember. And our estimate for production, we should increase by 70%. So, and in terms of industry also, this has a lot of implications. Declining crop and animal yields and high prices of agricultural input. This is already a result of COVID-19, and this is same thing that will happen to climate change also. There will be high agricultural commodity prices and also price volatility. And this has a lot of...
Dr. Ancha, you have already used like 12 minutes. Could you please wrap up in next 3 minutes?
Really?
Yeah, time goes.
Yeah. Okay, please. I will be very, okay, I'll quickly jump.
In next 3 minutes, please.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And increasing water scarcity and also safety and community relations. Okay, in terms of the emissions, agriculture is a major sector. As I mentioned before, along with land use and land use change, almost 24% here as per IPCC 2014. And this is a subdivision of the agriculture, how enteric fermentation or the paddy rice is contributing to emissions in agriculture. And the basic message here is, if we want to reach the Paris Agreement, we need to reduce almost 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture sector itself. When we see agriculture sector, we need to look at the entire value chain. There are many opportunities, either pre-production, production, post-production. And in Southeast Asia also, this is one of the fastest growth in CO2 emissions. Here again, a lot of... So rice, for example, 77% of the emissions are from the rice. Here, what is climate smart agriculture? I will not, again, this is already talked about. This is also called agricultural plus. Here we are looking at policy, environment, proven techniques, and also targeted investments to bring about transformational change. ADB is supporting a lot of things, in terms of knowledge as well as financing. And there are many innovations in terms of adaptations. These are technologies needed under various adaptations. I will not go in detail. And similarly with mitigation also, there are many opportunities that we can explore in the agricultural sector. And ADB is investing. These are some of the examples of the projects in Southeast Asia. For example, agribusiness value chain sector project in Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar for about $250 million. We are looking at the application of climate smart agricultural interventions, right from water to financing. And similarly, in the pilots in Laos PDR or in Philippines, for example, we also looked at various climate smart agricultural interventions. So, but there are many challenges also, either it is institutional financing, technological, etc. And basically, I would like to conclude here basically by saying climate change is going to be a game changer in agricultural development plans. And we need to have new business models for climate smart agriculture to transform our agriculture towards evergreen revolution. So this is a challenge that we all need to address, and I'm sure many government officials attending this one will pay attention. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for taking more time than expected. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Anchad. My thanks and sincere gratitude is due on 2 counts. One, for being kindly so sensitive to the time. You finished it actually in time. And the second, for putting so much knowledge resources in your presentation. And the good thing is this presentation will be shared. So I hope our participants will benefit from that. But thank you so much for giving us a very elegant and eloquent walk in through your presentation. Now it's my pleasure to request our second panelist. Professor Lee, the floor is yours now for next 12 minutes, and I'll intervene as I did, so bear with me. Thank you. What do you, Dr. Lee?
Okay, thank you, Basho. This is Sang Lee from Chungbuk National University in South Korea. Today, I'm going to talk about some transboundary development based on the food, energy, water nexus in the era of the climate change. So the main concept of in this project, this presentation is about how the water and food nexus relate to other main topics like SDG or transboundary resource management or multi-scale modeling. And finally, I introduced one case study about some nexus model. We applied the nexus concept into our agriculture in South Korea, and we developed one model we call SNAC. So first I start with the concept of the water and food nexus. Maybe someone already heard about the nexus, but maybe someone has the first time to listen about the nexus. But the importance of the water and food nexus has really risen with SDG or some other sustainable climate change as well. That means we cannot solve some problem in the relating to the SDG with only one single solver. We need to think about some correlationship with other sectors. For example, if we want to achieve food security in terms of SDGs, but we also need to think about some relationship with other water or energy security. So the UN recommended the application of the nexus concept to the SDGs. The main concept, the figure looks like some complexity, but the very simple concept of the nexus is about there are some relationship. For example, water for food, or food for water, or water for energy, food for energy. So we need to really think about that holistic impact of the change in single variable on the entire system. So climate change also is main external variable affect not only food, but also water and energy, but also the relationship among the water, energy, and food. So the left figure is quite simple figure about how affect the SDG and climate change to water, energy, food, and access relationships. So very simple one is like, we need water for food. It's called irrigation water. We also need energy for food, like fuel energy for agriculture machinery. And we emit carbon emission from the energy used for food. So there is a kind of circulations. So we need to think about that relationships. So when we applied one SDG strategy into the water part, that also could affect the other part, like the food or climate change or any sustainable energy part. So that's why the nexus concept is really important for achieving the SDGs. This is one example about how simulated that kind of complex relationship within the water and food nexus concept. This is a system dynamics modeling. So when we change some kind of variable relating to the food security, like land productivity of the crop area, or the temporal change of the crop area, or food export, or food consumption per capita, or population change, how relate to the water part, how much water from the groundwater, or surface water, reservoir water for irrigation, was how much energy we need for food area, but also for supplying the irrigation water to food areas. So that is all relate to the carbon emission as well. So this is one case study in Japan and in South Korea. In Japan and Korea, especially in South Korea, we have a really high level of food security of the paddy rice, almost 90%, over 90%. But some people said, we have enough rice. But after climate change situation, maybe we really think about can we maintain that kind of high level of food security of the rice? If we want to maintain the high level of food security of rice, how much energy, water, and land do we require in the future season in terms of the complex relationship within the water and food nexus concept? So we can apply the temporal change of the consumption, land use, and finally we can simulate how much irrigation water, how much energy for agriculture area, how much agricultural land, paddy field area we require for maintaining high level of food security of rice in South Korea. And another additional information is about how much indirect or direct carbon emission to achieve that kind of food security, national food security. Of course, this is quite a lot of calculation, and spatial boundary is national scale. So my research team really tried to downscale that modeling into the more regional level or local level. And next topic is about transboundary. You know, the traditional transboundary means kind of water across the country board. But in this time, we really think about some new transboundary, including not only physical boundary, but also virtual boundary. It's like the virtual water trade. You know, if we trade the food, we also think about some water embedded in the food trade. So this is one case study in Japan, in Kansai region. Main concept is about we already conducted many research about how much water from the water basin to food producing area, like agriculture area. But we don't know how much water contribute, how much water basin to food consuming area, like urban areas. The stakeholder, actual consumer of the food living in the food area. So the change of food pattern, consumption pattern, is maybe affected the water management in the water basin. So we try to quantify how much water from watershed to producing area as a physical water, and how much water from producing area to food demanding or consuming area as a virtual water. So we call physical virtual water flow from watershed to food demanding area via food producing areas. So this is one output in the Japan case. Unfortunately, there are no exact data how much rice, the transportation of rice among the prefectures in Japan. So we apply some gravity model to simulate more identical or potential rice transportations. And we apply this water footprint data of each prefectures and finally calculate how much physical water from water basin in Kansai region to some food producing area in Kansai region, and how much physical virtual water from food producing area to the food demanding area, like urban areas. And very interesting is if each prefecture prefer consuming more local food, like if you live in Kyoto, if you want more rice from the Hyogo region, like what happened in the water and like physical and virtual water transboundaries. So we applied several scenarios. One scenario is less local food consumption. Another scenario, more local food consumption. And in this case, the first scenario is northern water basin in the Kansai region more relate to the food demanding area in Osaka. But if every prefecture tried to more consume their local rice, the Rose water basin area more physical and virtually relate to the Hyogo prefecture rather than Osaka prefectures. So this is one case of the Kansai region. Our team also tried to expand this case study entire Japan or entire Korea, but also entire global scale as well. So we really tried to figure out some global main water basin, how global water basin relate to or affected by some main food consuming countries in terms of not only physical water, but also virtual water trade as well. And finally, we also consider about the energy part as well, not only water part. So we need more new definition about water, energy, and food boundary in terms of water energy nexus. So we apply the watershed, energy shed, and food shed areas. So we try to modeling of each boundary. Finally, we try to combine each modeling into the multi-scale modeling using system dynamics. So we want to know if the government set some policy about the water use or some irrigation water use or some groundwater use, how affected the energy policy or food policy as well. So now we are working on collecting the many database, because this is modeling really based on the big data. So we really collected some many database, and we try to simulate the future water part, energy part, and also food part as well in terms of water and for the nexus boundaries to find out the holistic impact. Now, this is one case example of our nexus model. We called SNAC, Smart Nexus for Agriculture in Korea. So it's some tricky one. Usually when you drink the beer, you eat some peanuts. We call some snack, different spelling, but anyhow,
Professor Lee,
yeah.
Sorry, you have like 2 minutes to wrap up.
Okay, this is almost the last part. So
thank you.
This is SNAG main focusing on the climate change impact on water, energy, food part in agriculture areas. So we simulated the irrigation water under the climate change scenario, also land productivity or energy use in the paddy field area. But also we also applied another scenario about some irrigation methodology like continuous irrigation and intermittent irrigation, how affected some other part of food productivity or energy use. So this is the module of that one. This is a real model in the web-based model. So user can select the climate change scenario, and we applied several GCMs. Not only can ESM, there are many GCMs. So we applied the GCMs. User also applied the source of irrigation, and that's irrigation, the type of the irrigation, like continuous irrigation or intermittent irrigation with irrigation water from reservoir, 50% water from reservoir or here, and fertilizer, everything. And finally, this model gives some result about how much water and how much energy and how how much sustainability in terms of your selections. So this is the conclusions. I explained it very briefly about the nexus, but this is not only simulation model, it's more conceptual framework. And also it's not single model, it's like a platform linking multi-models. So this is not only scenario assessment, it's more based on the decision support system, more feasibility and applications. Thank you for listening. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Professor Lee, for your very knowledge-intensive presentation, and especially the way you actually brought in this water trade, because every food contains water. So trade in food meaning trade in water. I think it will add a new perspective in our thinking in policy making, leading to water pricing, and which I hope will eventually lead to smart use of water, as you mentioned, avoiding continuous irrigation, which leads to ponding of water in the paddy field and contribute to the greenhouse gas emissions. So there is a direct linkage between this water trade embedded in the food and the climate change adaptation also. Thank you. I'm sure our participants will benefit more from sharing your presentation, which will be done in 2 weeks. Finally, for our session, let me invite Ms. Bo Thi Hai to make her presentation. Ms. Hai, floor is yours now for next 12 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brasso. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I would like to present our research. My presentation includes 5 parts. The first is introduction. It can be seen that climate change is the most emergency of concern over the world. It's measured by the change in temperature, floods, storm, hail, acid rain, droughts, and so on. Agriculture is one of the most vulnerable sectors to impact of climate change, not only in short term, but also in long term. According to FAO, cooperatives, which is the economic model of majority of small farmers, plays as a good solution to confront climate change. Sơn La is a province in the northwest of Vietnam. It belongs to one of the lowest per capita income groups in this region in 2020 and is affected by climate change. Furthermore, the cooperatives development in this province has been top 10 highest growth rates in whole country since 2015. Therefore, we want to conduct this study in Sơn La to test or prove the role of agricultural cooperative in supporting farmers to adapt climate change to 3 following objectives. And to conduct this study, we combine the literature review, survey, and case study. In these presentations, the case study is the 2 emerging cooperatives, and it will be made clear in the next section. Turning to the results, to have a holistic view of the role of agricultural cooperative to adapt climate change, some main points of climate change and the current status of agricultural cooperative in Sơn La province are reviewed first. During the periods in 1961 to 2016, the average temperature increased, and it is forecast to continue to rise higher in the future, especially at the end of the 21st century. More unusual weather phenomena and extreme weather events occurs, such as rain occurs irregularly and rainfall decrease. Heavy rain concentrated in the summer and in short time leads to flooding. Number of hot spur years increase, and the hot season starts earlier and ends later, leads to droughts. Number of bitter cold days per year decrease, and the cold season starts later and ends earlier. Storm, hail, and acid rains occurs more frequently, thereby causing damage to human life and agricultural production. And let me turn the current status of agricultural cooperative in Sơn La. Within 10 years from 2010 to 2020, the number of agricultural cooperatives newly established and active in Sơn La increased sharply from 19 to nearly 600. This number accounts for 86% of total number of cooperatives in this province. However, it can be seen that agricultural cooperatives in this province are small, both in terms of total assets, scale of operation, and member. Most cooperatives are concentrated in the region 2 and region 3, where the economy and other conditions still remain difficult, vulnerable to impacts of climate change. Therefore, the development of cooperatives in this area also plays an important role in ensuring social security, increasing income, and improving the capacity of households to better adapt to climate change. The percentage of cooperatives operating well is still low. However, they have also made initial contribution to support their member. A member also agree that the benefit that they gain when joining cooperative is that buying better input quality inputs, raising their awareness on technical issues, and increasing market access and reducing production costs. In fact, the fact that the solar cooperatives take part in steps of producing process from inputs to output state. At the input stage, cooperative organize the joint purchase of quality inputs at a reasonable price, and they introduce quality supply to their member. At production costs, they provide technical service, create jobs, and participate in supply chain, apply high technology and good production in processing and harvesting. And agricultural cooperatives support their members to sell their products through participating in consumption chains. In each stage, these cooperatives always strongly support their members to improve achievement and finding solutions to confront climate change, in which there are three following emerging achievements and success adaptation. The first, that enhancing green and safe production. These achievements can be clearly observed in the case of the 19 May Agricultural Service Cooperatives. These cooperatives operate in fields of cultivation, animal husbandry, processing, and tourism. They apply good agricultural production practice complying with GAP standards for cultivation and animal husbandry, reducing the use of pesticide, using biological products, and therefore they contribute to protect environment. And they combine all activity as the circular economic model, in which the maximum reuse of waste products at each stage as an input for the next stage, such as a vegetable and tuber left over from cultivation. Waste from processing become the food for livestock. Waste from livestock become the fertilizer for cultivation and biogas for processing. Fresh food from farming and final product from processing provided to tourists and traders. Thereby, the activity contribute to reduce 10 to 15% of production costs, reduce emission to environment, and contribute to protect our ecosystem. To work sustainable development of cooperative, especially in the current context of climate change and the pandemics. And the second role is that cooperative to contribute to mitigate the effect of climate change and increase capacity to adapt. It can be seen in the case of nature safe vegetable cooperative in Mộc Châu, Sơn La. To confront the change of weather, these cooperatives have selected two new higher quality vegetable varieties and actively change the seasonal crops, switching from corn or rye to shorter day plant or fruit tree, which is better drought tolerant plants to better adapt. And they also apply high tech to produce increasing like smart and drip irrigation system to reduce water loss, have a crop method to minimize water evaporation, and intensive cover to prevent from pests and reduce damage caused by rains, hail, and acid rain. There are some pictures reflected agricultural cooperative and the member activity to adapt climate change. And their activity to contribute to this, to increase the income for member is higher. It's 10 times higher compared to the old crop and old method. And the last one, through their activity like training, supporting technical, sharing experience, organizing to visit pilot model, providing timely and useful information, being a bridge between member to stakeholder. Cooperative contribute to raising awareness from member about climate change and change their activity in safe production. Through the above results, it can be seen that the role of cooperative in supporting farmers to adapt climate change is that the role in the orientation to a green and safe agricultural production towards national and global standard. The role in innovate effectively in community to adapt climate change from successful cooperative model and successful success lesson. Linkage the office and farmer, especially between member and local government in implementation on of environmental protection, and the role in directly reduce the negative activity of destroy agricultural ecologies through the environmental friendly practice, and the role in the application the solution for climate change adaptation. And from the finding of this topic, we conclude that cooperatives have a role in supporting members to adapt climate change and to help small farmers better adapt to climate change. To suggestion point out that should have a solution to attract more farmers to take part in cooperative, and should have the solution to stimulate the effective of cooperative models. And my presentation and here. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thai. Very informative and useful presentation, because as we know, although Europe has a very successful record of cooperatives, in Asia we struggle a lot. South Asia has a old history of cooperatives, but yet the success is not that impressive. So good to know that at least in Vietnam, we saw from your presentation 58% of the cooperatives are either performing fair to very good. So a lot to learn from it, and I'm sure this is just the beginning in our learning curve, and we'll have more opportunity in the coming days to hear and learn more. Now in the question and answer session, so far I have like 3 questions from our learned participants. One was very specific and already answered by Professor Lee. It was about one assumption of his model. A question from Shubir Shen, which has been answered already in the question and answer box. If there is nothing more to add, probably we'll move to the second question. Professor Lee, do you have anything more to add besides you? I saw you already answered to this question. Is there anything you want to add?
I think I already done. So it's okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Then we have another interesting question from Wang Seng. I think this is probably one of the most important questions. His question, to summarize it, like, we are listening to all this knowledge and informations here, but what is next? What is next from here, especially in the context of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic? So I know this is a question not directed to anyone specifically. Probably if you allow me, I would request someone from ADBI to answer this. And also I'm lucky to have my colleague Srinivas Ancha, who is leading this climate smart agriculture working group. And he's, as I mentioned in the beginning, he's very knowledgeable on ADB operations. So Dr. Ansa, if you don't mind, would you give, if you feel like, share some perspective what ADB is thinking in following this COVID-19 pandemic? I think the question is about that. Over to you, Dr. Ansa.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bashar. Basically, this is a very important question. So this is where we need the, as my last conclusion says, the efforts of governments, development partners, private sector, and farming communities is crucial. So in order to have that green, inclusive, and sustainable recovery from the pandemic, we need to ensure that whatever climate change, whatever agricultural investments that we are developing should integrate these concerns, both climate change concerns and COVID-19 related recovery concerns. So we should not treat them as separate, COVID-19 recovery as separate from addressing climate change. So this should be parallelly considered. So the most important part for the policymakers is to really look at the investments that the country is doing. It's not necessarily the investments by other development partners. First of all, they need to look at, because the domestic investments are substantial, they need to ensure whether the investments are really improving the resilience, improving the recovery, contributing to employment generation, or that type of things for pandemic recovery. At the same time, the investments, is it vulnerable to impacts of climate change? If it is so, are we doing enough climate proofing? Or are we doing enough, integration of adaptation concerns? Similarly, are there opportunities for reducing greenhouse gases? So we need to look at each so the design process and the role of policymaker is critical. And that is where the development partners and private sector can also help. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ancha. I'm wondering if anyone from ADBI would like to intervene at this stage in response to this question. Just an open invitation. Young, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Bashara. We are still behind the schedule, so I would like to move to third section.
Okay, so but before that, just allow me 1 minute, because there are two questions. There are some questions to Ms. Hai. So one question is about whether you have, Ms. Hai, question to you, whether you have any monitoring of the traceability mechanism in place to monitor the activities of the cooperative activities. Related to that is like how these cooperatives are affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you just take a short crack on them. So over to you.
Yeah. Okay. In my country, especially in Sona province, some cooperatives apply the systems is supported by local government to try to monitoring and control the quality products of member. Like they follow the they to work the big gap or global gap standard. So when they join, become a member of cooperative and local governments monitors and control their production process to follow the standards.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. So the local government has a mechanism to monitor the member cooperatives. That's, yeah. Okay, I think that answers the questions. To what extent these cooperatives have been impacted by COVID-19?
Yeah.
Yes,
of course. So,
okay.
However, I think that's when member joins cooperative is they will be better adapt to COVID-19 because okay. They can access to the markets. How to say the markets? They can easy to sell their products they can are supported to get more benefits from COVID.
Yeah, we expected that because the impact of COVID-19 pandemic is omnipresent, so everybody is impacted. So for the interest of time, right, I would like to conclude this session here, and thank you so much to our experts, participants, and everyone for listening. Days, over to you, Ingukli.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bashir. Without a break time, we will start the third section. In this section, we'll discuss digitalization of agriculture. I would like to introduce the moderator, Dr. Dil Rahut of ADBI. He is currently Senior Research Fellow and Economist of ADBI. Prior to joining ADBI this year, he was a Global Program Manager for the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center's Socioeconomics and Sustainable Intensification Programs. He has over 100 publications in Scopus Index journals focusing on development issues across Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Dr. Dil, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Dr. Yong. Thank you for your kind introductions. Good afternoon and good evening to everyone who are attending this conference. I'll be moderating the sessions on digitalizations of agriculture. As our former colleagues, our former presenters and moderator have clearly highlighted that agriculture is very vulnerable sector, is vulnerable to production risks, the post-harvest risks, market risks, and ecological risks. And some of the things that came into during the discussion was that agriculture is both victim as well as the contributor to the GHG emissions. Therefore, agriculture can play a very important role in reducing the GHG emissions through practicing climate smart agriculture on one hand, and on the other hand, through the practice of climate smart agricultures.
Okay, I think the internet is unstable. Oh, yeah.
Got disconnected. Sorry, my internet went off.
Yeah.
So having said this, I think digitalizations and mechanization can play a very, very important role in reducing the risks of climate, in reducing market risks, and also in helping farmers to integrate to the markets on one hand, and also to access to informations on climate, on markets, and on different development in agriculture sector, the sector that's happening. And several research have found that the farmers in developing countries have now, because of access to internet and Android phone, they are able to access lots and lots of informations on weather, on seeds, on different aspects of productions. So ICT and digitalization can, of course, play a very important role. However, the challenge is that if you look at the mechanization that's happening, even it's becoming very challenging for poor farmer to adapt to those mechanization, because it's a cost is one of the important things. Second thing is that ability to use those technologies also difficult. So one of the things that I'm always worried about is how our smallholder farmers, which comprises close to 1 billion, and these are the people who are vulnerable to climate change, the most vulnerable group, and these are the people who have very, very low income. How do we help them? How do we scale technology to them? So these are the challenges that we are facing, and I think through the next discussions we'll be able to see the problems and how mechanization is able to help reduce the risks and how we can scale this technology. With this, let me hand over the floor to Dr. Jitendra. Dr. Jitendra Aryal had worked several years in agriculture sectors. He's a natural resource and development economist. He had graduated from Norwegian University, and he had worked in several organizations like Tribhuvan University as a professor, and also he has worked as a senior climate economist with International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center. He has several publications on issues related to climate change, and also he has written several papers on mechanizations in South Asia and different countries in South Asia. And I had the privilege of working with him on several papers on mechanizations and climate issues. Floor is yours, Dr. Ariel.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Dale, and other participants. Let me share the screen first. Is it visible to all of you?
Yes.
Hi?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Jitendra. I'm from Nepal, and I'm very happy that you gave opportunity to present in ADBI and ADBI present seminar or conferences. And I briefly discuss on farm mechanization in South Asia and what are the importances, prospects, and challenges. Let me go through why farm mechanization in South Asia first. But in general, we can say it is not only for South Asia, it is for all. It's because agriculture is still one of the major sectors contributing to our GDP and also employing large segment of the populations throughout South Asia and other developing countries. And that's the reason we need to see how farm mechanization can affect multiple sectors in these countries. And other issues, why we need is like, we face 3 or 4 challenges now. One is like rising labor shortage and increasing wage. The other is like, we have to ensure food security, but also look through the issues, how can we make agricultural more sustainable in the face of climate change and in the face of other natural resource degradation. That is what we need to be very careful. And that's the one thing where we can address by using farm mechanization. If you see the countries in South Asia, we can see the share of agriculture in GDP is fairly large. Though it is decreasing, but its share in population employment or the employment is really, really very high. Even in India, it's almost like 43% or 43% of the populations are employed in that sector. And if you see the case of Nepal, it's almost like 65%. And only in Maldives is 8.5%. But on the average, the share of populations employed by agriculture is really high. And that's why the farm mechanization is going to have several implications to the society. So another one is like the issue related to the food security. In all regions, in all countries in South Asia, we have very low per capita arable land. The only way to ensure food security is to increase per capita use of inputs and also the efficiency of the land use. So the one way to enhance efficiency of land use and productivity is to mechanize the farm and use the other inputs in its optimal form. So we can increase the productivity. And that's the major issue where we have to hit. And if we look at this issue, what are the major objectives we need to go through for the next few decades? We need to look at how farm mechanization impact different sectors in South Asia or in other countries, why it is important that we have briefly discussed. But we also need to see what are the prospects of doing farm mechanization. Is it really possible to go through the farm mechanization, given that we have some challenges over here? And those challenges are related with different sectors, like it may be on policy, it may be on the agricultural sector, it may be on environmental issues, and it may be on how we adapt to technology, which is invented somewhere, and how we adapt to that one. And we need to look at, okay, what are the other possible scenarios that may go together? Like what are the possible pathways to make it success? And this is what we have to discuss. In case of farm mechanization, we always started with the substitution of labor by machines. That was the major issue, because we want to reduce the drudgery for the human labor, and then we have to reduce the impact of labor shortage in the peak season. That's what we have in the agriculture sector, because in agriculture sector, since our production is always related with the climate or the seasonal variables, we have to adjust our labor accordingly. So in that case, use of machines or farm mechanization can be one of the major solutions to avoid these problems. That's the first thing. And it has been documented by what we have observed in Green Revolution in India and elsewhere. Yeah, and it is already documented that it with other inputs too, because not only the mechanization, but we also have other input to use, like we have irrigations, we have hybrid seed, we have other technological improvement in agriculture, but that combines with farm mechanization and gives the increased productivity. That's what the one major thing. And the second thing we have observed is like, since we are having several sectors in the economy, the competitiveness of the agriculture sector is very important, because in agriculture, we have to do many of the operations very timely. And then timely harvesting, timely sowing, and several things are over there. And we have the issue of value chain, because once you develop something, we have to put that one in a very good value chain, so that many of the perishable goods in agriculture should not be, wasted. That's the one issue in agriculture, because food loss and waste is a massive issue, and it's one of the issue, but because what we produced is almost like 30% of what we produced are also wasted. So we have to be careful. And next one is like, we have to look at the agricultural air pollution, because if you take the case of India, crop residue burning is very high in Haryana and Punjab, in one of the most producing regions. So in that case, what we have to do, because the farmers burn crop residue of the previous crop, let's say rice, in order to sow wheat on time. So that's one of the major issue in India. It has major health cost. It has major pollution cost in India. So we have to reduce that one. And the one way of reducing that one is applying conservation agriculture. And that can be done by using happy seeder, because happy seeder can sow the seed of wheat, even if you have the straw of rice over there, certain height, let's say 1 feet. But that reduces a lot of residue burning in the region. And that's what we are looking for. And that's why we also need. And if you see the picture, how we moved, we moved from very basic farming in Nepal, like, plowing with oxen to plowing with tractors and these things. This is moving on, we deduce that. And this is the thing, what we are talking about is like, we have this happy seeder, and this machine is very much useful now. It's reducing air pollution by reducing the burning of the crop residue. That's the first thing. And it reduces nitrous oxide emission from fertilizer, because it is more like seed and fertilizer is introduced together into the soil. And so that the nitrogen oxide emission is very much limited. I don't say it's almost known, but it reduces a lot. And so that we can reduce CO2 emissions from residue burning. And in the meantime, we can reduce nitrous oxide emissions from fertilizer. So it's in the open source. So these are the things we have to be very careful on. And these are the importance of, we in a way say it's more like climate smart mechanization. We can also inform that way, but this is where we need to go. And then we still go, why it is? Because we have done some research in Haryana, India, using turbo happy seeder. That's the one of the machine to seed the wheat seed into the rice field, where we have straw of the previous rice fields. And we found that it increased the productivity, as well as it reduced the GHG emission from agriculture. That's really interesting. And we found that a shift from our conventional tillage-based system, in which we just use human tillage or tractor tillage, and we moved to conservation tillage, and we save, like, we increase the economic benefits, farmers' economic net returns are also higher per hectare. And in the meantime, we reduce GHG emissions by almost 1.5 megagram per CO2 equivalent per hectare per season. That's what. And the other issue is like, it is not only reducing GHG emissions, not only increasing the profit, but also it is increasing our adaptations to climatic variability. And we did one experiment in Haryana, India, and we published that in Agriculture, Ecosystem and Environment. And we found that conservation agriculture, which is more by using a turbo happy seeder, a kind of machine which can sow even with the rice straw in the field. And we found that it is more valuable for the farmers. It's because farmers can cope with untimely excess rainfall, especially for the wheat. And that's one of the best thing for climate change adaptation also. So in a way, it's more like, we are moving to that one. We are moving from simple labor substitution to climate change adaptation, climate change mitigation, and addressing the problem of the real world situations, what we are facing now. And the next one is like, we did another, another study using laser land leveling, another machinery used for managing, leveling the land, and also, and its efficiency. And we tested that one. What are the resource use efficiency in that case? And we found that irrigation water use efficiency is very high in that case, as compared to the field level traditionally by using tractors or other traditional methods. And in the same way, we found that energy use efficiency in agriculture is very high, especially for irrigation water use efficiency, because water pumping and water use allocation is really high in that case. That's a very efficient way of managing resources: water, energy, and fertilizer. These are the three key resources that aids onto GHG emission from agriculture. And in the meantime, that is one of the way where we have scope for reducing GHG emissions by better utilization of resources. That's what we always look for. And the next point is like, I'm discussing about this laser land leveling. So it is more efficient for water saving, and it is also more efficient for energy saving, and we have higher yield, almost like 8% more higher yield in several cases in both rice and wheat, and energy saving is also higher in all cases. So this is not only going to reduce the environmental burden, but also the fiscal burden of the government in the country like India, because in India agricultural subsidy is very high, and especially in energy subsidy for irrigation is almost very big, and that can also reduce that, so that it has multiple effects. So this is what we see, and those are the benefits, and those are the things why we need mechanizations in South Asia and also in all developing countries. But are there prospects to go for that one? Yes.
Dr. Aryal, can you wrap in 5 minutes, please?
Yes, sure. And we went through, okay, what are the possible ways, or what are the prospects? And we see that there are three ways. One is local learning and adaptations of the farm nations, and local universities and research institutions have been used for this purpose in India, China, and several other countries. And the second one is like increasing rental market. This is one of the major issues in Bangladesh and also in Nepal and India, because rental market for farm machinery services has provided an opportunity to the poor farmers to use these machineries without purchasing it. And that's one. And the third one is like, now the young farmers are more, they are using more climate smart practices, using, more innovations, more, using more mechanizations in that one. And the other one is like, as IFRI report has said, we have major supportive policies, because policies are also distortive in several cases, like subsidies. But when your subsidy is managed with some of the other issues, like how to bind the technology with subsidy, then you have very supportive policies. These are the prospects what we have in our case. And then we go for what are the challenges then? Because when there are prospects, there come challenges. But the first challenge is like in Asia, as we have already mentioned, the farmers are poor, and also they are very small landholdings. If you take the case of India, Nepal, and Bangladesh, the average landholding size was almost like not more than 0.7 hectare. Yeah, that's the case. And then the other one is like, we always talk about rental market, or market system is very powerful in giving equity or access to the mechanization. But there is always uneven development of farm rental market. It's in all market, but it is also found in farm rental market, and we have to overcome that one. And the other one is like subsidy-driven adoption of machinery. Yeah, farm machinery is more by the project or by the government. So the farmer needs to learn themselves and tackle that one rather than subsidy-driven. This is one way we need to think more, and we need to address that one carefully, because subsidy is needed for poor farmers, but how far we want to make them, reliant on the government and also the other sectors. These are the things we need to be very careful, and these are the bigger challenges we have to think on. And what are the way forward? We just always think, okay, even the first speaker say we need to make the better value chains. Value chains for the poor farmers. That is what I always say. Value chains is not only for the big, larger markets, larger producers. We need to be careful that we have to have some sort of value chains which gives, provides, facilitates the small farmers. That's what we have to be careful. And we have to encourage the local manufacturing, local knowledge. That's the local business we have to be very careful on, because that is one of the issues we have also learned from COVID-19 cases, because many of the laborers were moving from one part to other part of India, and they died on the way to their home back. And this is one of the lessons why we need local manufacturing and local value chains stronger for the farmers. And the third one is like, we have to address the uneven development of the rental markets, policies, and greater market integration ways. Because rather than giving subsidy to some of the things, it's better that they are given money to integrate into the market and sell their products. That's the one way we make them more creative rather than passive farmers. We don't want to create passive farmers by giving more subsidies. That's not the aim of the policies in any case. That's what we have to say. And then the last one I should say is like, we need to enhance public-private partnership approach rather than government subsidy alone. Because in many cases, in many reports, we say, okay, we need to provide the subsidy by this much, but who is going to fund for that project? Who is going to pay for that? Because we always say like government is funding that one, but it's not easy. It's not the easy way to go through that one. So we need to see what are the public and private approach to go that one, and then how to make mechanization profitable to small farmers and profitable to the business owners. And that gives us the perfect way of, addressing the mechanization or agricultural mechanizations in South Asia and elsewhere in the developing world. And yeah, with this, I have to say thank you very much.
Dr. Ariel, thank you for your wonderful presentations. It was very great presentations and lots of information and knowledge. We have few questions here from Luis. His question is, would zero tillage help in reducing GHG and agronomically recommended? This is especially for resource poor smallholder farmers. No, it's okay. Hello. Dr. Young, it seems Dr. Ariel just got disconnected. You're muted. Dr. Young, you're muted.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's okay. Sorry,
yes.
Yeah, sorry. It's the
Yes,
internet
please,
problem. I'm in the mountain.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it is true, because in the experiment we did in Haryana, it's a 3-year experiment, and we found that there is a significant reduction in GHG emissions. Yeah, that's why it is possible. And in the question of farmers' benefits, we found that not only me, the other researchers also found that it's almost like more than $100 net revenue gain by the farmers per hectare, only in wheat. So there is a possibility. Yeah, but there are also other issues where how far we can go for zero tillage in developing countries, because it should be in the system rather than in one crop. That's a question always come through. Yeah, so that is an ongoing issue, because we have to do zero we did zero tillage in wheat, and then the farmers till the land for rice, and that's not the perfect case. But if we can do it for the whole cropping system, that is really beneficial, and that's the issue where FAO and several other CG systems are working on. Yeah.
Yeah. Last question to you. It's also from Louis. His question is on like productivity and market. Productivity and market has been adversely affected by climate change and COVID-19. Would you recommend agro-processing, that's post-harvest technology, for perishable goods so that shelf life can be extended?
This is really very important questions, because if we see the agricultural product, food waste and loss is one of the major issues, and the post-harvest loss is one of the major area where we need to research further, because many of the research up to now in agriculture are more focused on the production, how to increase productivity, how to enhance the production system efficiency and these things. But what happens after we produce something? That is, yeah, a lot is going on that one, but it's still, yeah, I agree that we need to have better value chain system and better locally adapted system, so that we need to be very careful on that one. And that's the lesson from COVID-19, because we need to have some sort of system at the local level, so that we have better production, better productivity, and also better reservation. We have to keep the food, not only the harvesting, we have to reserve it somewhere. Yeah, that's the issue we are thinking now, and that is very important, I can see. And the government's food system and other distribution system are also relied on these issues, so we can't ignore that. But we need to build on the new system, and the whole food system is now have to think in an alternative way, because we might have missed some of the points. I'm not saying, yeah, because we all might have missed some of the points that has already been shown by COVID-19. Even in India, which has like largest food distribution system, they missed a lot of things. Even with that, food system and food distribution system, many of the farmers, they died. Many of the labor, they died. And many of the labor, they suffered a lot. Yeah. So we need to be careful in designing new approach or new systems to protect these things in the future, because we are working with several C's. I say climate change, COVID, and several others. So we have to be very careful on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ariel. I think.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You have really pointed it out very well. I think food waste is one of the major contributor to food insecurity and also GHG emissions. By minimizing food waste and food loss, I think we'll be able to reduce GHG emissions on one hand, at the same time enhance food security, particularly in developing countries. I think food waste is very, very high even in developed countries. I think I mean, like, you cannot imagine how much food is being wasted. Anyway, thank you so much. With this, let me pass the floor to Dr. Yong.
Oh yeah, we have another presenter in this session. By Hyungwon sir.
Do you mind introducing Yong?
Yeah. I would like to introduce Hyungwon sir. He is currently working as an assistant professor at Donghua University. He is also more than 20 publications in peer-reviewed journals, conference proceedings, lecture books, and professional magazines. He will present on smart farm development in the Republic of Korea. Professor Sir, please. Professor, floor is yours now.
Okay, am I clear enough?
Yeah.
All right, let me get started. Thank you very much for joining this session, and thank you for your patience remaining up to this last moment. As Mr. Young has introduced myself, I'm assistant professor at Donghua University, and I also I'm a founder and CEO of a company, Digilog, a startup company that I recently founded. I'm honored to present the case study examples focused on artificial intelligence applications in agriculture under the title of Smart Farm Development in Republic of Korea. My background goes agricultural engineering and agricultural robotics. I've studied in Iowa State University, US, and Seoul National University, and I got PhD in agricultural robotics with artificial intelligence from the Wageningen University at the Netherlands. According to the recent report published from OECD and FAO, there are 5 core technologies categorized in AgTech. Well, AgTech is a combination of agriculture and technology. As you can name it, it includes advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, and IoT, and big data, etc. Among these promising technologies, I like to focus in this session only onto the intelligent system category, which is on left corner here, that covers artificial intelligence and autonomous system and robotics. 2021 PitchBook Emerging Technology Outlook reported that there are 3 highlighted trends in AgTech last year. The first one is automation and robotics with artificial intelligence. And second one is indoor farming, also known as a smart farm. And third one is a plant-based meat, also known as an alternative protein. Well, among these 3, robotics and automation with AI, this first category has the most attention by means of research and R&D investments. In 2021, the investment made the highest record in the history of agriculture, which means that a large amount of money and research has flown into this area. But now agtech development now is driven by 2 primary factors, or 2 primary global challenges, so to speak. The first one is a population explosion. According to World Population Prospect, United Nations, the world's population is expected to increase by 2 billion person in the next 30 years, from 7.7 billion currently to 9.7 billion in 2050. This population growth itself is not a bad thing, I believe, but the problem is we don't have enough food to feed all these people on this planet. As of 2018, food shortage and demand has reversed worldwide, which means that even if we add up all the food supplies in this planet, there are shortages in food as an absolute number. We are now living in a time that there are absolute shortages in food supplies and food productions. So it is required to improve resource use efficiency and make a technological advance to catch up the shortage worldwide. The world's population is growing older as well, with the age group of 25 and over growing the fastest. The second challenge, as you can, we had enough discussion in the previous session, but it indicates a climate change. Well, global average CO2 concentration has reached the highest in the history of the Earth, and related to this increase, number of natural catastrophe events are going up worldwide every year. As you can see on the left side, the increased share of climate-driven events. At every corner of the world, we are experiencing unexpected and distinct natural disasters that are different from the previous patterns. So in response to these global challenges, the Republic of Korea have set 3 main agenda in agricultural research and policy. The first one is robotics, use of robotics, accelerate the use of robotics in the agricultural sector to replace the human labor. And the second is use of artificial intelligence to reach the maximum efficiency. And the third one is sustainable electricity energy generation while minimizing the CO2 emission. The first use case goes to a robotic system for strawberry farm. I named it as a Digilog bot because I'm a main driver, developing driver for this particular case. And it's an automated pest control robotic system with autonomous navigation within a greenhouse. AI-based camera system enables to automatically detect pest, and once the pest is detected, the minimum amount of chemicals is being sprayed only upon the target. This leads to an effective control of a pest with 90% of reduction of chemicals used in the strawberry production in Korea. At the moment, 4 different pests are being detected thanks to the AI-based camera system with a deep learning network. We will continue to improve the accuracy of detection, and we will further develop to detect more pests that are commonly found in strawberry farms in Korea. Well, here is a demo video that we made last October at one of the farms in Korea. And as you can see, it has an ability to autonomously navigate within a farm environment, and the camera system makes a 3D scan of the pest, which will be analyzed further in a lab later. And all this progress is being updated to the client or customer phone by means of a dedicated app. Well, still a research phase, but we hope to release this machine, this robotic system, sometime late next year. A second use case I'd like to share is AI-based decision support for small-size greenhouse farm. Well, all the necessary data is gathered from the greenhouse and analyzed by means of artificial intelligence, and then provides a useful information for farmers so that they reach to the optimum greenhouse environment throughout the growing period. Well, this particular project is sponsored by Amazon AWS Innovation, Cloud Innovation Center, and Team Digilog, and Donghua University, and farmers can receive example text messages or voice messages, as you can see in the presentation, such as the condition in the greenhouse now is likely to have a mildew issue. Please raise the temperature or ventilate, etc. So such messages will help farmers to make the decision to maximize profit by optimizing the greenhouse operation and food production. Well, the third case I'd like to mention is the fuel cell connected greenhouse. Well, this project is still under research and pilot stage, but the goal is to develop sustainable energy generation while minimizing the CO2 emission by AI-assisted advanced greenhouse system. Well, fuel cell generator generates electricity, but it produces a bit of a CO2, like here. And but this CO2 is to be captured and put into the nearby smart greenhouse, where the plants could use the CO2 in their photosynthetic process. Then oxygen will be produced and released onto the air. As you may aware, the advanced greenhouse, they maintain the CO2 concentration level up to 1,300 ppm, a very high level of CO2 in their greenhouse system. So this will benefit in response to carbon tax later on, and the heat that is being produced from the fuel cell generator also captured and feed into the greenhouse, so the greenhouse can be heated by use of this captured heat. Well, lastly, the conclusion and my suggestion, digital technology, AI in particular, helps farmers by giving them useful information and advice, which could revolutionize how rural communities secure their livelihoods. And COVID-19 has made us all dependent on digital technology, but we must ensure that small-scale, low-income farmers are not left behind. And last but not least, Asia-Pacific economies should join forces in agriculture to meet the challenges of climate change. Well, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yoon. Thank you for your brilliant presentations. I think it's an eye-opening, and I really liked it. I mean, I liked your presentation so much that I didn't want to even stop you when you were going. It was really brilliant. I really enjoyed. One, if you look at your conclusion, you have really pointed out that this is a great innovations that's happening in agricultural sectors. And we shouldn't leave out smallholder farmers from poor farmers. As you know, I mean, developing Asia, we have almost close to 700 million smallholder farmers whose land size is less than a hectare. I mean, some are even half a hectare. So how do you think that we could scale this technology to these smallholder poor farmers in your opinion? They are resource constrained, they are very poor, and they almost don't have any resources. So your views, please. Yes.
Dr. Rahul, thank you for your question. Well, that's a very good question. All my life I've been thinking about how we can help small scale farmers so that they can also stand up and hopefully to be able to compete with large scale farms. But unfortunately, I have not been able to find an absolute answer yet. But I believe one of these digital technologies, particularly the artificial intelligence, it can help farmers to reach the highest level of production efficiency so that they can increase their profit. That's the hope I have.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that that poor farmers in developing country will not be left out of these great revolutions that's happening, or poor farmers in developing countries, like, don't suffer because, the production system is being hijacked by, let's say, the big giant producer or giant companies, and poor farmers are at the mercy of big giant companies. So that's one worry that I have. There's one question from Aisu. The question is, what other country use this technology, especially autonomous navigator?
Well, this autonomous navigation system is newly implemented in nowadays, particularly for those sort of rich countries. So North America and Europe, they are starting to get adapted to this autonomous navigation system in their mechanical system. And but in Korea, here in Republic of Korea, we just started to adopt these autonomous system. But many farmers are still, seems to be very afraid of these autonomous system because they may accidentally hit farmers, or they may damage the farm structure. But this has to be resolved in the coming years, I believe.
Yeah. One of the interesting thing that you have in your presentation is that, the robots are able to identify, the insects or the pests and diseases exactly, and only, use that level of pesticides in so much of precision that I think that's also a very great innovations, in the sense that today we are suffering from the problem of pesticides in many developing countries. The food that we use are filled with pesticides. I think that's also a great innovations, and I just hope that we also, people in developing country, sorry for bringing this context of developing country again and again, are able to benefit from the kind of innovations that you are leading.
Absolutely, I agree.
Any question from the floor? I think these are very interesting presentations, and then we would love to hear from any questions from the floor. Yeah, since there is nothing, talk to you, would you like, do you have anything to share? In the sense that, this is a very, I think, interesting presentations. It's a new revolutions that's happening in this century. And do you have anything to add? Yes. You're muted.
Well, I made a very quick presentation in order to receive as much as questions from the floor. So if you if you don't have any questions at the moment, please, you can write me an email. I love to have a conversation with any participants in this session. And as Dr. Rahul mentioned, I love to explore these technologies apply in developing countries as well. That's also my passion in agriculture. So we will see how we progress.
Yeah. There's one, I think, comment here where I think it's a very good comment. Every country should work on AI assisted agriculture to meet the food demand. I think this is a very positive comments and recommendations to the work that we are doing, and also, from ADBI side, I think I hope and I wish that we'll be able to organize some more like, very focused session with you, because, this is something new, and I think everybody is excited to listen to it, given the climate change that's happening. And also like, rising populations, the demand for like, food is increasing. So yeah, this is wonderful. Thank you so much, and for your wonderful presentation, much appreciated. Dr. Young, floor back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Dio. It's time to close our webinar. I would like to invite Deputy Dean Seung-Ju Baek to give the closing remarks. He's currently Deputy Dean of ADBI. Prior to joining ADBI this year, he served as Deputy Minister for Planning and Coordination at the Ministry of Economy and Finance of the Republic of Korea. He has 30 years of economic and development policy experience. He also served as senior policy analyst for the OECD and international development expert at the World Bank Institute. Deputy Dean, please.
Thank you, Yong, for introducing me. Yeah, good afternoon and good evening, everyone. Yeah, this is Seung-Ju Baek, Deputy Dean of the ADBI. Yeah, we are running out of much time today. Anyway, today in this workshop, we touched a wide range of thematic areas, including the impact of the pandemic and climate change on the global value chain in agriculture and food security. As presented and discussed today, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought lots of risks on the normal flow of agri-food global chains. Also, agriculture accounts for a significant share of greenhouse gas emissions through agricultural activities and changes in land use as well. In this context, it is very urgent policy issues to look deeply into the problems and seek solutions for more sustainable and resilient agriculture. It is also very important to find a way how to ensure food security and how to strengthen the adaptive capacity of agriculture in the facing challenges, including the pandemic and climate change. Digitalization in agriculture could be one of the solutions to transform the agricultural business and contribute to the sustainability and development of the food supply chain. I believe that today's workshop was a good opportunity for the participants, policymakers, and experts to have gained useful knowledge and policy implications to address the impact of the pandemic and climate change on the agriculture and food security. I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to our partners, the Vietnam National University of Agriculture and ADB, and moderators in each session, Dr. Tran Hu Kung from VNUA, Dr. M.B. Abwal Basha from SDCC ADB, and Dr. D. Lord from ADBI. My appreciation goes to all presenters in each session as well. If you don't mind, let me skip calling the names of each presenter. I hope the policy insight derived from this workshop will be helpful to your future works. And I look forward to more intensive and engaged policy dialogues and networks building in the future. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope to see you again. Thank you.